Catch-22 situation for COP29. Red America worries Green Brigade. Asia tired of West's blame game. Will Musk electrify Trump's plans? What's at stake at the 2024 Climate Summit?
Ladies and gentlemen, the annual Climate Summit is back, and so is Donald Trump. COP29 began today in Azerbaijan's capital, Baku, with the world preparing for some tough talk on finance and trade. While the focus is largely on climate finance, fears of turbulence remain high with Donald Trump's return as the American president, someone who called the climate crisis a big hoax. United States has been the largest donor of climate finance, and its next president hasn't shied away from standing completely against any climate action. From his infamous withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement in 2020 to his 2024 stance on not spending American taxpayers' money on clean energy, Trump 2.0 has given way to heightened fears. Now, the Baku summit hopes to resolve COP29's top agenda, a deal for up to $1 trillion in annual climate finance for developing countries, replacing a target of $100 billion. India has in the past few years been firm on developed nations who have already exploited resources in the past decades, shelling out more for climate finance as compared to developing nations who are only beginning to build themselves and progress. Election results do not change the law of physics, and this year is on track to be the hottest on record. Climate extremes and climate refugees are the new reality, challenging both the poor and the rich, developing and the developed, and no country is fully equipped to handle these human-made emergencies. But will a seemingly mellowed down Donald Trump pay heat now? We'll have to wait and watch, and those are the very concerns that now dominate COP29. To talk more on this, I'm joined by Mr. Anil Trigunayat, former ambassador. I'm also joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, Vice Chair, Manipal Advanced Research Group. Good evening, namaskar to both of you gentlemen. Professor Nalapat, let me begin with you. Donald Trump has called this a big hoax. During his campaign 1 month back, he said there's global warming, and if the oceans are rising, shouldn't we be happy about it, because then we'll have more beachfront-facing properties. These are the words of Donald Trump. He's also somebody who withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. How do you see this moving now? How do you see the world, particularly the United States, the largest climate donor, contributing in this entire climate action battle?
Shreya, the climate chairman has already warned of a catastrophe, and the world has basically entered a catastrophe, a climate catastrophe. Oceans are rising. Some of the island countries will not be there after much longer. There's no question that climate change is real, but the fact is that it's very convenient for the developed countries to put the blame on Donald Trump. The reality is that in the United States, Trump is giving overwhelming power to the states. So different state governments will have different environment policies, and the electorate will decide which policy is better. At the same time, you have private companies, and private companies definitely, they understand the reality of climate change. They're facing the impact of climate change. And so you'll find that also definitely a lot of action being taken. Now, what's happened in Europe? I mean, Germany, you've got a Green Party as a major partner. And Germany is basically, it's still dependent on fossil fuels and other such fuels. In fact, both Germany and Japan were trying to phase out nuclear power. The reality is nuclear power is a very clean source of power. And what is happening, Shreya, is that under cover of this climate crisis, you've got China almost getting a dominant, if not a monopoly position in batteries, in solar batteries, a dominant position in electric vehicles, BVD. And that is proving to be a great risk to other countries. So how do you get rid of these batteries? People should ask that question. It's
Yeah.
very, very climate unfriendly, getting rid of the huge number of batteries that EVs are basically mobilizing. And of course, it's no surprise that Macron, Scholz, Biden, and von der Leyen, who have been talking night and day about the climate, they haven't come to this particular summit because they know they'll be basically
Yes,
exposed to the
Professor Nalapat,
hypocrites
of
they
course,
are.
that
This
tussle
100
remains
billion.
between the
Yes, Shreya,
developed
just
and the developing
one
world
last sentence.
as to
One
who
last
should
sentence.
shell out more in terms of climate
Yeah.
finance. But Ambassador Trigunayat, since Professor Nalapat talked about China, let me also ask you this then. The Chinese have made a proposal on behalf of BASIC countries. There's a group BASIC at this summit that includes India, Brazil, and South Africa, and they've asked the summit to address the restrictive trade measures, something that is very important when it comes to financing, the climate action. And with Donald Trump coming in, somebody who's talked about increasing tariffs, particularly on Chinese goods as well. How do you see that really now impacting, since, we'll see a Trump 2.0 and there are concerns of a deja vu happening?
Well, as Professor Nalpat also said, the Baku, the theme is back from road to ruin. I mean, how you are going to get back from here, and it's also called as the finance cop. Well, finance cop means trying to get about $1 trillion, whereas we have not
Yes.
been able to get even $100 billion. So that's the one of the key issues here. The thing is that there is no willingness on the part of the global north to provide or equalize or provide equity to the others. Now, China has emerged and has been trying really hard to green its industrial this thing. In fact, there have been several studies which show that some of the problems that they have faced in recent times with regard to the economy is also due to the result of their trying to green their economy faster. At the same time, they have emerged as the major producer of the electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles, on the one hand, are a good thing because they help you, do some reduction in the emissions. On the other, they create a market distortion, and that's precisely what the Western countries don't like. So here again, there is some kind of, I would say, uh, the imbalance that occurs in the policy prescriptions and the real desire. There comes a trade distortion, and the basic and others may say or do whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if the major polluters in the world are not on the same side, and if, for example, Trump once again decides to opt out, calling it a hoax as he has done, then I think we are looking at a very, very challenging times ahead. Most of the because of the Russia-Ukraine war, because
Yep.
of the weaponization of the food, fuel, and fertilizers, we have seen Germany and the European countries also moving more towards coal and other, these kind of fossil fuels. So this is something that's a real thing, a real problem, existential problem for the humankind. Yet COP after COP, we have reached 29 and we have not been able to get what we had agreed in 2009 and onwards and 2015. So these are the critical issues, crucial issues, and there is no semblance of any kind of a synergy emerging out of these COPs to me. And I will doubt very much if we are able to even achieve $100 billion, forget about $1 trillion.
And therefore, Professor Madhav Nalapat, how do you see this then working out for the global south? You also have something that the EU has been pushing for, that's the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, something that is hoped to be implemented by 2026, which perhaps could work against global south countries like India and China, two countries which have been villainized in this entire climate crisis, when it should be the developed nations which would actually be taking the responsibility of this entire situation that we're all in.
Shreya, let's not compare India and China. First of all, China is not part of the global south, whether geographically or in terms of total income, or even now in terms of per capita income. It's not part of the global south anymore. So let's avoid that. I think basically, it has outlived its function, and China is using it as a way of trying to prevent tariffs from rising. during a period when tariffs are going to rise, because there are a lot of hidden subsidies in the Chinese system, and that's why they're able to compete all over the place. Besides the fact that the way they get their technology is something that you and I know very well will happen. Now, nuclear energy is obviously an answer. Fusion energy is an answer. And I think if we manage to get work on two things, one is cheap energy through nuclear fusion. And second is if we get desalinization at an economical level, then I think, frankly, we are well on the road to saving the planet. Technology has been the only key that can work to basically save the planet. And I would put emphasis on nuclear fusion. I remember way back, the Homi Bhabha, the father of our atomic program, he was talking about nuclear fusion. I think we need to supercharge that, and we need to supercharge that with friendly countries, not with unfriendly countries who are at war with us in various ways. And frankly, I think this entire speaking on behalf of BASIC is basically a way of China trying to ensure that tariffs don't hurt it, when the reality is it's flooding the markets all over the world. And a lot of these markets are reacting by imposing tariffs, including on Chinese EVs. So, frankly, Shreya, I think Ambassador Trigunayat is absolutely spot on when he says when even 100 billion has proved very far from being met, not even 10%. Some countries haven't met even 5%. And when we're talking of 1 trillion, it's great. We can talk of 1 trillion, 5 trillion, 10 trillion. But when you don't do 100 billion, how on earth are you going to say that we're going to do 1 trillion? The fact is that the developed countries have basically totally tried to shift the burden onto the poor countries. And the poor countries, frankly, many of the people there are living on the margin of subsistence, unlike what's happening in the developed world. And they can't afford any further lowering, any further tightening of the belt. Their belt is already totally tight. It can't be tightened any further. And the countries that can tighten their belt, they're not doing so. But again, I would like to say, as far as BASIC is concerned, the Chinese are very cleverly using it as a tariff dodging exercise when they are flooding the world with imports, which have got all kinds of hidden subsidies in it. Shreya.
Yeah. Okay, Ambassador Trigunayat, it's interesting how it's really panning out for Donald Trump and his second presidency, because Donald Trump has been saying that I'm going to cut the funds that go in clean energy projects. At the same time, he's backed by somebody like Elon Musk, who is one of the pioneers in electric mobility. He's been pitching and pushing for EVs. And with the kind of role that Elon Musk has played in this entire campaign and the victory of Donald Trump, how much of the influence do you think would be there from the part of Elon Musk in terms of, clean energy focus by the United States?
Well, I mean, the US polity is very peculiar in the sense that it is the money that makes the mayor go. So without that, it doesn't work. And Elon Musk has put all his might behind President Trump until the last moment. And today he is also been assigned a very important task of cleaning up the government and pruning it out and, changing it somehow. And so he is very likely to put some of his people. At the same time, his being there would possibly, will prevent Trump to once again dumping the climate change agreement. So that is quite possible. In that sense, he may not opt out this time, but he definitely tried to put the screws on certain things because that's a country of lobbies. And whether it is the energy lobby, the hydrocarbons lobby, the shale lobby, whether it is the other refineries and all, so they have their own stakes and they pay a lot to continue on this kind of a path. So therefore, and Trump has been supported and he has been openly critical of these kind of thing, calling it a hoax or whatever. But at the same time, I think that he, this time, I mean, I don't know, somehow this is my hunch, that he will perhaps be a little more pragmatic this time in his outreach, and which is quite evident from several initiatives that he has already started. So let's hope for the best. But at the same time, I fully agree with Professor Nalpat about the subsidy that the Chinese do it. At the same time, the large the world majority essentially is of developing and underdeveloped countries who are suffering the brunt of the climate change that is taking place, and they are the ones on the receiving end. We see the green apartheid, we see the lack of the green finance, the technologies, and we see that the total, I mean, there was a discussion for a lot of time, a polluter pays principle, now loss and damage fund, which was activated, but still no funds available there. Now this time they're becoming very
Yeah.
ambitious, and I saw that the Azerbaijani leader, the president of the summit, he said very clearly that two track or two pillars rather, that enhancement of ambition and enabling of action. Now, in this, you may be ambitious, but how do you engineer the action is the $1 million question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's wait and watch how this really moves forward between the developed and the developing world and the Trump 2.0. Perhaps we're judging Donald Trump too early. Let's see a seemingly mellowed down Donald Trump, how he performs in the second presidency that he has. Thank you very much to both of you, Ambassador Trigunayat and Professor Nalapat, for joining us on Global Mirror and sharing your perspective. Thank you very much.